Hi there, everybody. We're back with another week of The Perfect 10. My 10-week series I'm running on future skills. So the top 10 skills that I believe organizations have to develop now and in the future in order for the organization and its people to thrive. So I'm Marilise de Villiers. I'm a performance coach, best-selling author, and cybersecurity people and change consultant. The Perfect 10 is a series on my YouTube channel called Your Bullyproof Life. And this is where we talk about workplace culture and we talk about how organizations can create safe and inclusive workplace cultures where people can show up at their best every day, where people can thrive. And it's so important because at the end of the day, the organizations that engage, enable and empower their people are going to be the winners. They are going to be the resilient organizations. They are going to be successful. So the Perfect 10 really fits into that as, you know, the skills that we have to invest in our people, which is going to differentiate people from machines and is going to make people the strongest, most powerful asset in the organization. So we're already in week 6 of the series, and this week we're going to be talking about the skill of courage, demonstrating courage. Demonstrating courage doesn't mean that you have to save the world or do something grandiose. Sometimes it means taking that first step towards change in an unpredictable world. And when has that ever been truer than in this time we're living in today? For me, that was the day I was demoted in front of my entire team. I found myself in the bathroom afterwards, crying my eyes out. But then I looked up in the mirror and I saw deep down inside of me a little voice, a little glimmering of hope. And the voice said, Marilise, enough is enough. And that little voice of courage made me quit the next day. What is your moment of courage? How are you going to take that small step towards lasting change in this really unpredictable, uncertain world we live in? So today I'm joined by the amazing Dr. Amina, who has her own story of courage and has come today to share that with us. So let me tell you a little bit more about Amina. Amina is a transformational coach and consultant who works with professionals and leaders who feel stuck in their career. With over 20 years experience, first as a physician and government policy advisor, she helps people create healthy lives and environments. Her book, The Success Trap: Why Good People Stay in Jobs They Don't Like and How to Break Free, is a reflective and practical guide for those who want to go beyond conventional careers and embrace new possibilities in the 21st century. So I'm so excited to speak to Amina next. I'm going to jump over to Zoom now and have a chat with Amina. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Amina, to the Perfect 10.
Hi, Marilise. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So I'm so grateful that you're here today with me. I've been following your journey for a couple of years now and so inspired. Why don't you tell our listeners or our viewers a little bit more about you and your own story and journey with courage?
Great. Yeah, thank you. It's a great theme. So I guess most people would know about the career leap I took in 2016 after a long career in health and medicine and policy, which was my dream career for maybe the most part of 2 decades. Wow. And so I think what most people know about me is that in 2016 I took a completely different direction from the career I'd been building for nearly 2 decades. And so I think that's where maybe the courage element comes in, because like for most people, if you've invested so much of your time and energy into something, and it's something you love, it's not something you don't like, it's difficult. It can feel very challenging to suddenly follow an intuition or a new idea or a new direction. So it's that I needed a lot of courage at that turning point. And yeah, that was definitely an experience of what it meant to be courageous as a professional in the modern world.
Yeah. And it's been incredible to see, you know, and I think I can relate so much, because I took that leap not too long after you. Mine was in sort of towards the end of 2017, and I remember being introduced to you. Someone, a contact in my network, tagged me in a post that you did, which was really popular, and it was about the #1 toxicity factor. And why organizations, well, why people don't leave, you know, bad bosses, but they leave bad or toxic organizational cultures. And I think that's really where, you know, I saw a lot of synergies between sort of what you are doing and that I'm doing. And so the reason why I wanted to invite you to come along today. So what is your sort of definition of courage? How would you sort of explain or describe courage to someone?
Yeah, well, so my parents are linguists, so I developed a love of language and trying to understand what things mean. So the etymology of courage, it comes from the Latin, I believe, cor, which means heart. And I think that's perfect. It means you're living from your heart, or from a sense of knowing and of something you feel is right and true for you. To me, it also suggests something about a kind of intensity, an intense willingness to represent what's true for you in the world. Because that's not easy. We, as humans, we like to belong. We have a need for connection and belonging. And if what's true for us clashes with what's true for the group, there's then a choice to be made that can be scary. If you speak your truth, then you might be rejected from the group. And so courage is the willingness to sit with that dilemma, to me, and then make a decision that's right for you, even if you're not sure of the consequences, or you're afraid of the consequences, because a part of you may well be afraid of the consequences. But yeah, be okay with that somehow.
And I think it's particularly pertinent when you do have a career pivot, like both of us had, you know, in terms of, you know, investing 2 decades in an environment, in a profession where you build your whole identity around that, don't you? And then suddenly having that moment of realization where, gosh, I don't think I'm quite on the right path, and then to have that sort of courage to turn in a different direction. I wanted to pick up on this sort of psychological safety, because I think, you know, having that courage, as you say, to make that decision and to say, you know, it's not, I'm not conforming, this is not right. You need to kind of be in an environment where you feel psychologically safe to do that. Why don't you just kind of share with us a little bit your thoughts on that?
Sure, yeah. So psychological safety is a concept developed by Professor Amy Edmondson, who's at Harvard. And I think it kind of relates to trust, to something we would call trust. And she defines it as the culture or environment where team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable with each other. So if you're wanting to do something different, either for yourself or for your organization, that's going to entail risk, because people might not like the idea, or you might try the idea and it might not work. And that feels vulnerable. So implementing the idea requires courage. And then if your environment supports you, so provides the psychological safety for you to take risks and maybe fail and learn from that so-called failure, then you're at an advantage. And I believe the argument is that if companies, organizations, teams cultivate psychological safety, then it's more likely that people will innovate, come up with new, useful, creative ideas to solve problems that they face.
Yeah.
And with the level of disruption that we experience in society, in the world, in business today, business leaders are increasingly recognizing that kind of innovation is needed. And so it follows that cultivating psychological safety would be a good idea.
And I think it's important to highlight, that I love Amy's work, and I think the idea that you create high levels of psychological safety doesn't mean that you're not holding people accountable. So there's also really high levels of accountability, so we're not saying kind of, be pushovers, bend over, create like a really lovey-dovey pushy or pushy ovary environment. It's all about having that sort of balance, high psychological safety, but also high motivation and accountability, and as you say, creating that sort of learning environment, where people can really put their hands up and be courageous and say, I don't understand, because there's probably a few others in the room that don't understand, that have the same question, but how often do we actually speak up because we're afraid to say, I don't understand, or you don't want to put someone else's nose out of joint. There are so many reasons why, we decide to keep quiet, and what do we achieve at the end of the day?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think that's absolutely right. And it's not about doing away with other structures that support goal setting and performance and accountability, but I think it's about balancing the competitive aspect of work culture with something more collaborative and supportive to reach the best mix, I suppose. And coming back to your point about toxic work cultures and how many people relate to that, I think the fact that post, the article about toxic work culture was so popular, just shows how many people are experiencing the downside of purely competitive, goal-driven cultures. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's about balancing rather than just creating a woolly, lovey-dovey culture.
Yeah, and I think, that sort of, I think for me, that sort of impression of a toxic culture, I mean, it's really hard sometimes when you're in a situation, when you're in a toxic environment, to really objectively kind of stand back and identify, whether it is actually a toxic environment or a toxic relationship, or a bullying relationship. So, what would you say are the sort of telltale signs, that you're in a toxic environment or you're dealing with a toxic person? What would be sort of your top warning signs?
Yes. So there is some research on this, and my doctoral research was in a department that focused on some of these aspects, so I extrapolated from that to try and make a link with what it is that creates the experience of toxicity. And so there are a few indicators. So so one of them is high effort, low reward. So you're putting a lot of yourself into the work, but you're not seeing the recognition, the promotions, the salary, whatever it is, just the support sometimes. But people just sometimes want to feel that they're part of something meaningful. It's not even a material reward they're looking for. So high effort, low reward. There might be an imbalance between workload. It's sort of similar, so I might skip that point. But the third point would be hierarchy. So feeling you're part of a rigid hierarchy, and which entails competition, but not enough collaboration and support, or not enough mobility up and down, well, or rather up the hierarchy. Not many people want to move down, although moving down a hierarchy is also a possibility, and some people choose it because it means it gives them more time and space for other things in their lives. So I would say, yeah, and then I suppose I'm interested in your point of view on the bullying, how bullying plays out. It's not something that I'm an expert in by any means. So I would say within that high effort, low reward, and rigid hierarchical structure, how does the bullying play out? Or what's the link with bullying?
So that sort of hierarchy, I think, creates the environment, for the bully to thrive. So I think it's important to recognize, and I always say this, and I think it's a big aha moment for people, where a bully cannot bully without an environment, a context, a culture that's allowing the bullying to happen, but also a target or a victim that allows the bullying to happen. So it's quite hard sometimes when you're in a hierarchy where someone is in a position of power, where you think that you have any control over that dynamic and that relationship, but trust me, you do. So when I talk about the toxic trio and I talk about the sort of the dynamics that play out, every part of the trio have a role to play in the actions that they take or the actions that they don't take. Because even sometimes, especially from a culture perspective, if you don't take an action, that speaks louder as well, so that sets that precedent. It normalizes the behavior. But I mean, bullying really is typically characterized by sort of, it's really intentional. So you'll know when you deal with a bully when you try to resolve the situation, and there's just no recognition on their part that they actually have any part to play in the challenge, in the problem that you're facing. So it's that whole denial of, I'm not part of the problem, and they would laugh it off and dismiss it. It's repetitive, so it's they're really over and over and over and over again. It happens. So it's not just a once-off. It happens repetitively over long periods of time, and it's done with the intent to harm. So you really want to. There's this dynamic going on in the bully's head, which is, I call the winner versus loser dynamic. So I want to win at all costs, and I will make someone else to be the loser. And that is interesting dynamic, because that then plays out in the bully having to compete with the best. So it's often the highest performers that are being targeted, because they have to show I'm better than the best, because of this overriding theme of I'm a winner and you're a loser. And that's different to the playground bully, where it's often the weakest person that's being targeted. So that, for me, when I did my research for my book, was just an incredible aha moment, because I thought, I was the only person that it's ever happened to. I thought that I was the problem. I thought that exactly.
Psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, that's sort of how I would help people sort of spot the signs. It's very hard to pinpoint, and it's also, what makes it more complicated is there's no legal protection for the targets or the victims, unfortunately, still today.
Right.
So it's about my word against your word. So the only way that you can get justice is you take it all the way to court of law, and you fight it out. But of course, that in itself rarely happens, because by the time the victims do something, they are so exhausted emotionally and physically that it's just, easier to walk away or to leave quietly. And that's why the majority of people do that. So it is. And I have to say, it happens a lot. I've recently been reading a book about one of the first books ever that was written on workplace bullying by Andrea Adams 30 odd years ago. And I'm reading the book and I'm like, still happening. And it's like, the problem has not, gotten any better. Well, the environment, it's still a massive problem today. So, but anyway, so coming back to sort of your, I wanted to pick up on your book, the success trap, you call it.
Yeah.
Why good people stay in jobs they don't like and how to break free. That to me just smells like courage. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your book?
Sure, thanks. Well, I'm reading through the proofs right now, so I'm trying to wrap my head around my own book because because I wrote it in one go over 3 months or so.
And congratulations, by the way. It's a huge achievement.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, your book was published. Was it last year or this year? So
yeah, towards the end, December last year. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know what it's like. So I guess the main theme of the book is that it is possible to be free. We don't have to suffer in work and our careers and lives. So it's kind of a timeless message, which is what a lot of my work now is based on. It's scientifically supported timeless wisdom. So like you said, you know, there are things we've known not just for decades, but for millennia. Mm-hmm. And sort of trying to thread these things together, the timeless wisdom and the scientific, what we know scientifically as well. And but it's applied specifically to the world of careers and work today. So there are 3 parts. The first part describes a little bit the world of work today, particularly the VUCA world, that it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that's just the nature of the world we're navigating. So there's nothing wrong with, you know, you kind of feeling confused about your career in your 30s or something. It's actually a pretty confusing world right now. Mm-hmm. And the statistics show that it's quite normal for people in the West, at least in Western countries, to hit a career crisis in their 30s. So it's all fine. So it's describing some of that context that people are making decisions in about their careers. The second part dives into some of the tools, so some of the deep methods that have worked for me and for clients that I've worked with, particularly in questioning our assumptions. So I find that most transformational work, or most of the methods that help us break out of our sort of mental traps that hold us back in the wrong job or the wrong relationship or whatever, they're very responsive to questioning specific thoughts and specific beliefs. It's difficult to take whole long narratives and work with them, especially as they build up emotion, and then it's difficult to be to reason around them. So working with specific statements I find works very well. So I describe some of that and some of the tools that I use, and particularly a 5-question method that I use, and just seems to create a huge shift in a small amount of time. I call it the happy process, the high achiever paradox transformation process. Mm-hmm. I also share some tools around slowing down and self-care. I think I saw one of your podcasts, you're interviewing someone, I think it was someone you'd worked with, and the theme was physiology and the importance of sort of mastering our own responses, as it were. So I really highlight that in the second part of the book. Self-care. Mm-hmm. We don't do enough of it. And the instinct is to drop self-care when we get stressed, when the wise thing is to up it so we can recover a more neutral physiology and make decisions from there. And the third part goes more into culture, work culture, organizations, leadership, entrepreneurial mindset, which are a different way of looking at the world of work today, at our careers, and a different way of making decisions. So careers for life are gone, and we need to embrace a different way of thinking, put on different lenses. So that's the third part.
It's that sort of portfolio of careers that we now have, and I think it's also the integration of the work and life, which is now we've seen in the last 6 months, and I think it's been difficult for people to navigate the just there's no more divide, even the commute in the mornings or in the afternoons on the train, people are now saying, oh my gosh, there was actually something good about it because I got that sort of mental break, to just do something completely different, or now everything seems to be blending in so much, so I mean, everything you've just said resonates so much with me, because I think there are far too many of us who compartmentalize work success, and then at the cost of our own health and our own happiness, so we think you can't be successful in your work, in your career, and be healthy and be happy, but I think that's what I'm advocating. I know that's what you're advocating, is that it is about that self-care piece, as you say, is so important, because then you can recharge your batteries. Colette calls it decompressing, and it's all then about being able to show up at your best, because at the end of the day, if you don't, then everybody around you suffers. That's how I've started thinking about it in my own life, because I knew that when I was struggling, my husband was struggling, my kids were struggling, everybody around me were affected as well. So that was my cue to actually say it's important that I invest in myself, that I prioritize myself on my list of priorities. I can't wait for your book. I'm so excited to read it.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Like an amazing book.
I will say that back on coming back to courage, because I think this message is a bit more prevalent now, that you need to slow down, you need to take a breath, you need to look after yourself. It's not, by all means, the job isn't done, but I think the message is a little bit more prevalent. But I think people will struggle when they are not sure. They come to a point where it feels like I have to look up. If I look after myself, will this job support me or not? Will this environment support me or not? And I think it can be very scary to contemplate that I'm going to have to make a choice, a material, significant choice, that maybe I need to leave this environment because the environment won't change. Because it's great, right? If you start to look after yourself and suddenly your colleagues support you and your work's better and you're appreciated, but the reality is it doesn't always work out that way. So I think that's where courage comes in. You might not know, and it might not work out in the ideal way. Well, ideal way from the point of view of a fantasy where everything's perfect and rosy. So courage, I think, is required at that point, and to choose you and your well-being and your family, and the fact that there are other possibilities out there over continuing to compromise yourself, your values, your health, out of fear that that might not be something else, or you're trapped for reason X, Y, or Z.
I absolutely love. Yeah, I want people to.
And you're an example. What's on the other side.
I want people to rewind what you've just said. Like, you listen to it again, because it's such wise words. And I've actually had a conversation with someone this morning, who's going through a process of finding new opportunities. So also recently set up her own business, and two things I sort of left her with was, you have options. You always have options. It just puts you in a different mindset, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And the other thing I just said to her, that whatever opportunity you're pursuing, they need you more than you need them. And I think it's that sort of coming back to that is ultimately the courage, is to really that self-talk and that giving myself permission, and overcoming those limiting kind of beliefs, those negative kind of things that we tell ourselves every day, and having enough belief in yourself that, you can step away, you can step into that sort of, let's call it future identity, but that dream that you have, that vision that you have. Because let's face it, you get to those crossroads because there's more to life, and that the compromise and the price that you're paying, often within your health, is just not worth it anymore.
Yeah. And listening to that, I think you used the words earlier, that small voice of hope inside that says there is something else, it's okay.
Yeah.
And trusting that over the fear-generating, fearful voice or critical voice that puts you down and closes you off. And your book, I think, is a perfect title, Raw. The Buddha, for example, awoke, and there's this metaphor of the lion's roar. So I don't know if that's where your book title comes from, but that's what it evokes for me, that courage is this lion's roar of wanting to be true to you, to what you really know. And that energy, that intensity that's needed, like a lion's roar, to overcome the negative cloud of darkness that's holding you back.
Yes, it's 100% finding your authentic voice, you know, and it is that sort of intentional, but it is all about authenticity at the end of the day, you know, because not everybody has a loud thundering roar, you know, and it doesn't have to be a loud thundering
A little squeak at the beginning.
and that comes back to this sort of theme in the beginning where I said it could be the smallest first step that you take. You know, it doesn't have to be you saving the world or doing something grandiose. Yeah. It's that first action step that you take towards lasting change. And, you know, that creates that momentum for you then to pursue whatever dreams and goals you have, you know. So yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I can talk to you all day about this. I wanted just to sort of use the last few minutes just to sort of come back to some really practical tips. You know, I love looking at the sort of the leadership dynamic here. You know, if you're a leader in an organization, you know, what sort of responsibilities do leaders have in helping their people being courageous, you know, empowering their people to be courageous. So can you give maybe one or two top tips for leaders first?
Sure. I think, well, coming back to the hierarchy, if you're in an organization that's hierarchical and you're at the top, it's your job to set the tone. So to give you an example, a client of mine has been told it's fine for her to limit her work hours and to be able to be with her family, but the person saying that to her is a manager or her boss isn't living that way. So that makes it very difficult then for my client to truly believe that it's okay. So I think leaders have to set the tone of what they're speaking. They need to be congruent with the values they're putting out. I think I'll stick to one. Just set the tone.
That's absolutely fine. I think what I would also, something we picked up in the interview last week around agility and specifically around coping with the changes organizations were going through in terms of moving people from office working to home working. One of the themes that really came out for me was this idea that the organizations that navigated it better, that were more agile, had the leaders who put their hands up to say, I don't have all the answers, I don't know it all, let's figure it out together. And that in itself is a very courageous thing to do, I think.
Yes.
And then the individuals, you know, like what would you say to somebody who, you know, like both of us, you know, were in jobs where, you know, we weren't fulfilled. We woke up in the mornings maybe feeling anxious or, you know, just not living our best life, you know, and knowing that there's something more, you know, you have that sort of niggling feeling inside you. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think it's important for people to listen to themselves. And I just want to say that I love my job. It was my dream job. So that's why the book's called The Success Trap. Or it's one of the reasons that you might have succeeded, but maybe something is telling you now it's time for something else.
Yes.
So you may have had a bad experience or not, but something inside you is saying there's something else. So the courage is...
I'll quickly clarify what I've said, because I think it's important. The point you're making is absolutely key, because I also loved my job. Absolutely loved what I was doing. But it's the environment that was created by a bully that made it miserable, that made it a really horrible experience. So totally agree with you. You know, I think it is that. I have a friend who calls it the golden cuffs, the golden chains, the golden cuffs.
Golden handcuffs.
Yeah, the golden handcuffs. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, you also went in a different direction. So you could have found another environment without, without a bully, and stayed in the same career, but something took you in a different direction. So something in you is speaking to you and saying, okay, try this other thing. So I'd always say listen. Sorry?
Desperation.
Well, it might be. It doesn't matter. I don't know. I feel there's something else that's kind of creatively guiding you,
Yes,
rather than reactively guiding you.
100%.
I don't know.
No, 100%.
Or maybe the reaction turned into creation. I don't know. But it's like, you've done great things since then. So I would say, yeah, listen to that part of you that's whispering something, and it might not be very loud, like you said. It might be a small. It might not be very loud, and the guidance might not feel significant. It might just say, take an afternoon off, or claim your holiday, or don't go to that conference, stay home, or something small. But that's going to be the spark that lights something else. Yes. So I would say listen to the small voice, and also the small things it guides you to.
Yes. I love to say that the little things are everything, but you've got to, as you say, you've got to be tuned in. And yeah, so what...
Sounds like we agree on everything, Marilise.
I do think we are.
I don't think you needed me for this episode.
No, absolutely. Totally needed you. And I absolutely love... I love everything you do. Like every Wednesday, I look forward to reading your Wise Wednesday.
Oh.
I absolutely love that. I've not started attending the lives myself, but I know you've started doing live sessions on a Wednesday. So yeah, anybody who loves Amina, everybody who's watching, do reach out. We'll put your contact details in the show notes, so you'll be able to connect with Amina and maybe subscribe to her weekly Wise Wednesdays. As a starting point, it's just always very inspirational to read your content and everything you stand for. Really, really amazing.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you, Marilise.
Have you?
Likewise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you got any sort of resources that you think people might find helpful? Sort of on the topic of courage that might help people.
Mm-hmm. So again, your top resource is your intuition. Mm-hmm. I also like Pema Chodron's book Noble Heart, because she's really dissected the anatomy of vulnerability and provides a lot of wisdom and tools. So I recommend her book. I think also connecting with people, even through biographies or movies or books or whatever, that inspire you, because we're not necessarily exposed to that kind of courage. And then noticing how you also show up with courage in your life, noticing what other people are doing that, and really connecting with that quality, and demystifying it from being this heroic thing that's only for some people, but actually, like you said, it's just about being authentic in everyday life. And I totally agree with what you said, that did you say the small things are everything?
Yeah, the little things are everything.
The little things are everything. It reminds me also, I think it's a similar theme or principle, that how we do anything is how we do everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
love that.
If you share an idea authentically without diminishing it or apologizing for it or whatever, you're showing up with courage. You're saying, this is my idea. So
and absolutely, if you are going through a tough time, lots of people are going through lots of change that they've got to navigate, and it's even getting up out of bed in the mornings, and just doing something little. It really depends where you are in your life, and so I always kind of say to people, reach out if you are in a situation where you need help as well. We know that people are struggling in this time. Ask for help, raise your hand and ask for help, because there's always going to be someone who is going to lend out that hand to support you. So please do ask for help if you're in a difficult place in your life and you need help. Please have the courage to raise your hand and to ask for help. So Amina, thank you so much for joining me today. I had a lot of fun, a lot of insights as always, and I think our viewers are going to love this, and please do let us know, send us feedback, everybody, send us your thoughts as well.
Yes, thank you. Yes, people are welcome to connect at dramina.com.
Fabulous.
Thank you, Marilise. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for your wonderful work.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.